During my son's birthday dinner, they asked me not to be in the photos. I smiled, stood up, and canceled the credit card that would have paid for everything. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I smoothed down my navy blue dress, the nicest one I owned, as the taxi pulled up to Le Ciel, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Taking a deep breath, I handed the driver my last $20 bill and stepped out into the cool, evening air. At 64, I had learned to carry myself with dignity regardless of circumstances, but tonight was special. My only son Robert's 42nd birthday. The maitre d' looked me over with barely concealed judgment as I approached the entrance. "I'm here for the Blackwell party," I said, straightening my shoulders. He scanned his list, eyebrows slightly raised. "Isabella Blackwell?" "Yes, I'm Robert's mother." His expression shifted to something resembling pity. "Of course, right this way, Mrs. Blackwell." As I followed him through the dimly lit restaurant, past tables of well-dressed patrons, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a mirrored wall. My silver-streaked hair was neatly styled, my makeup subtle but carefully applied. I had spent 3 hours getting ready, wanting to look my best for Robert's important night. The private dining room buzzed with conversation when I entered. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the 20 or so guests mingling with cocktails. I spotted Robert immediately, tall and handsome in his tailored suit, laughing with a group of men who exuded wealth and influence. His wife Elaine stood beside him, elegant in a black designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Neither of them noticed me at first. I stood awkwardly by the entrance, clutching my small handbag. The room was filled with people, at least 20 years younger than me, all impeccably dressed and confident. Finally, Robert glanced over and his smile faltered for just a second before he excused himself and walked toward me. "Mom, you made it," he said, giving me a quick, formal hug. His cologne was expensive, unfamiliar. "I wouldn't miss it, sweetheart. Happy birthday." I handed him a small, carefully wrapped package, a vintage watch that had belonged to his grandfather. It had taken months of paperwork to get it released from the safety deposit box after my husband James died. "Thanks, Mom." He pocketed it, without opening it. "Let me introduce you to some people." Over the next hour, Robert presented me to a blur of strangers who smiled politely but quickly turned away. I heard snippets about investment portfolios, vacation homes, and boarding schools. Nobody asked me questions. Nobody seemed interested in the retired elementary school principal who had raised Robert alone after his father died when he was 12. Robert never mentioned his mother was so traditional, I overheard someone murmur. I sipped my water and watched Elaine charming Robert's business associates. She had barely acknowledged my presence with a cool Isabella when I arrived. No kiss, no hug. After 7 years of marriage, she still treated me like an acquaintance rather than family. I thought about the house they lived in, the beautiful colonial in Westchester that I had purchased 3 years ago when Robert called. Me, desperate because they were about to lose their dream home due to some temporary cash flow issues. I had liquidated my retirement fund to help them, telling myself it was an investment in family. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for dinner," the event coordinator announced. I found my name card at a table in the far corner, away from Robert and Elaine. The other guests at my table were Elaine's elderly aunt and 2 couples who worked with Robert but weren't senior enough to sit at the main table. They exchanged pleasantries with me but quickly formed their own conversation bubble. As the first course arrived, something tiny and artistic involving raw fish, I noticed a photographer circulating through the room, capturing the celebration. He took numerous shots of Robert and Elaine, then group photos of the various tables. When he approached our table, Elaine suddenly appeared at my side, touching my shoulder lightly. "Isabella," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "would you mind Terribly not being in the official photos? Robert's planning to use these for his firm's newsletter and some social media posts. Some of his most important clients are here, and we want to maintain a certain image. My heart froze mid-beat. I stared at her perfectly made-up face, searching for any sign that she realized what she was asking. There was none. "You want me to step aside when the photographer comes?" I asked, making sure I understood correctly. She smiled tightly. "It would be helpful. You understand, don't you? Appearances matter so much in Robert's position." Before I could respond, Robert appeared behind her, his expression apologetic but resolute. "Mom, it's just business. These photos might be used when I'm announced as partner next month. We need them to be, you know?" "Need them to be what, Robert?" I asked quietly. "Professional. Polished." He lowered his voice. "Mom, please don't make this difficult." In that moment, I saw my son clearly for perhaps the first time in decades. The boy I had sacrificed everything for had grown into a man ashamed of his own mother. Suddenly, I remembered something else. Robert had asked to use my credit card to handle the arrangements for this party. The same credit card that had paid for his first car, his wedding, the down payment on their first apartment, and countless other emergencies over the years. I smiled at my son and daughter-in-law, the kind of smile that comes from decades of practice, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. "Of course I understand," I said softly. "Excuse me for a moment. I need to make a quick call." I rose from the table, grabbing my handbag, and walked with measured steps toward the ladies' room. Once inside a stall, I leaned against the door and closed my eyes, allowing myself exactly 30 seconds of pure, raw pain. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I knew by heart. "American Express Customer Service, how may I help you today?" "This is Isabella Blackwell. I need to cancel my card immediately." "Is there a problem with your card, Mrs. Blackwell?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "It's being used without my authorization." "See? We can certainly help with that. I should inform you that there's a pending authorization for $17,750 from Le Ciel Restaurant. Would you like us to decline that charge?" I paused, thinking about the elaborate dinner being served at this very moment. The premium champagne, the 5-course meal, the professional photographer capturing images that I wasn't worthy to appear in. "Yes, please decline it, and cancel the card immediately." After answering security questions and confirming my identity, the representative said, "Your card has been canceled, Mrs. Blackwell. Is there anything else we can help you with today?" "No, that's all. Thank you." I ended the call and took a deep breath. Then I pulled a small envelope from my purse, the deed to the house in Westchester, which I had planned to formally gift to Robert tonight. I had even tied it with a small blue ribbon. I exited the bathroom but didn't return to my table. Instead, I walked to the coat check, retrieved my old wool coat, and asked the attendant for directions to the manager's office. The restaurant manager looked up in surprise when I entered his small office behind the kitchen. "I'm Isabella Blackwell, from the private party in the Crystal Room," I said. "I wanted to let you know that there may be an issue with the payment method my son provided. Here's my contact information if there are any problems." I handed him my card with my phone number. "Also, would you please give this to Robert Blackwell?" I handed him the envelope with the deed. "Of course, ma'am. Is everything all right?" "It will be," I said with a small smile. "Please don't mention that I spoke to you until after the party. I wouldn't want to spoil the celebration." He nodded, looking confused but professional. I slipped out through the kitchen exit, into the alley behind the restaurant. The cool night air felt cleansing against my flushed skin. I hailed a taxi and directed the driver to the modest hotel where I had booked a room for the night. Sitting in the back seat, watching the city lights blur past the window, I thought about how many times I had come to Robert's rescue over the years. After James died, I had worked 2 jobs to maintain Robert's private school education. I had taken out a second mortgage to pay for his Ivy League tuition when he lost his scholarship, due to partying. I had funded his fresh start after his first failed business venture. All those years, I had told myself I was being a good mother. Now I wondered if I had simply been a convenient ATM. At the hotel, I changed into my nightgown and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone began vibrating almost immediately. Robert's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then Elaine called. Then Robert again. I turned off the phone. I knew exactly what was happening back at Le Ciel. The waiter would have discreetly informed Robert that his card had been declined. There would be awkward murmurs, embarrassed glances. The powerful business associates would shift uncomfortably. Perhaps someone would step in to cover the bill. Or perhaps Robert would be calling every contact in his phone, desperately trying to avoid humiliation. For the first time in decades, his emergency wasn't my problem. Switched on the small television, flipping channels until I found an old black and white movie. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the window. Around midnight, a text came through from a number I didn't recognize. "How could you do this to your own son? You've ruined everything." Elaine. I didn't reply, but I did wonder what everything meant to her. A party? Robert's image? Their illusion of wealth? Sleep came fitfully that night. I dreamed of Robert as a little boy, his small hand in mine as we walked through the park after James's funeral. "It's just you and me now, Mom," he had said, looking up at me with those innocent eyes. "But we'll be okay, right? We'll be okay," I had promised, squeezing his hand. When morning came, I ordered coffee from room service and opened my laptop. I checked my bank accounts, modest but stable. I had enough saved to live comfortably if I was careful. The house in Westchester had been my largest asset, and now it was officially Robert's. My phone, which I had turned back on, exploded with notifications. 12 missed calls from Robert, 5 from Elaine, 3 voicemails, which I didn't listen to. A series of increasingly angry texts. "Mom, call me back immediately. You had no right to do that. No right. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? We had to call Richard to cover the bill. Richard, my boss. Answer your phone." The final message sent at 4:23 a.m. was different. "Found the deed. We need to talk." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my decision. I had spent my entire adult life being needed by Robert, defining myself through his demands and expectations. Who was I now? I opened my calendar app and studied the next few days I had planned in the city. Originally, I was supposed to have breakfast with Robert and Elaine tomorrow, then spend the day shopping for things they needed for the house. Now, those plans seemed like artifacts from another life. Instead, I searched for Art Galleries Chelsea and made a list of places I wanted to visit. James and I had always dreamed of touring the galleries together after retirement. He had been the artist in our relationship, teaching art at the local college while I handled the practical side of our lives as a school administrator. I had almost forgotten that part of myself, the woman who once loved art and beauty for their own sake, not as assets to be acquired. Just as I was about to close my laptop, an email notification appeared. It was from Robert, sent minutes ago. "We need to talk. Dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Tell me where." Not an apology, not a question, a command. For a moment, I felt the familiar urge to accommodate him, to smooth things over, to make everything right. Then I closed the laptop without responding. I spent the morning walking through the Metropolitan Museum of Art, losing myself in paintings I hadn't seen since James was alive. Back then, we would spend hours debating brushstrokes and color theory, him with his artist's eye, and me with my simple appreciation for beauty. Those conversations felt like they belonged to another woman now, a woman who hadn't yet learned how quickly love could turn conditional. My phone continued to vibrate in my purse. I ignored it until lunchtime, when I finally sat down at a small cafe across from the museum and looked at the screen. 27 missed calls, 15 text. Messages. 4 emails. The latest text sent 30 minutes ago read, "Mom, please. We're at your hotel. The front desk won't tell us your room number. This is ridiculous." So he had tracked down my hotel. Of course he had. I had forwarded him the reservation details when I'd planned this trip, back when I thought this weekend would strengthen our relationship. I sipped my tea and considered my options. I could continue avoiding him, but Robert had always been persistent when he wanted something. Or I could face him now, on my terms, in a public place where neither of us could make a scene. I typed a response. Central Park, Bethesda Fountain. 2 p.m. The reply came instantly. "We'll be there." The "we" didn't surprise me. Robert and Elaine were a united front when it came to their interests. I paid for my tea and walked slowly toward Central Park, using the time to gather my thoughts, the key. Were already waiting when I arrived. Robert pacing by the fountain, Elaine sitting rigidly on a bench nearby. Both were dressed impeccably, as though they'd come straight from a business meeting. Perhaps they had. Robert spotted me first. His expression was a mixture of relief and irritation as he strode toward me. "Finally," he said. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I met his gaze steadily. "Hello, Robert." "Hello, Elaine." Elaine joined us, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "Isabella," she acknowledged coldly. "Let's sit," I suggested, gesturing to a nearby bench away from other tourists. Once seated, Robert wasted no time. "You humiliated me in front of everyone who matters in my career. Richard had to cover a $17,000 bill. Do you understand what that did to my reputation?" "I imagine it was embarrassing," I said calmly. "Embarrassing?" he sputtered. "It was catastrophic. Richard made a joke about checking my commission structure. The Andersons left early. Elaine had to call her father to wire money to repay Richard this morning." I noticed he wasn't asking why I had done it. He wasn't questioning what might have driven his mother to such an action after decades of unwavering support. "I'm surprised you needed to call your father," I said to Elaine. "You have the deed to the house now. That's worth considerably more than $17,000. Elaine's perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together. "We can't just sell the house, Isabella. We live there." "Yes, you do," I agreed. "A house that I purchased with my retirement savings, a house that you now own outright, as of last night." Robert shifted uncomfortably. "About that. The deed was your birthday gift," I continued. "Worth considerably more than the dinner you planned to charge to my credit card without asking." "I was going to pay you back," Robert said, his voice dropping to a mumble. "Were you?" I asked. "Like you paid me back for the down payment on your first apartment? Or your wedding? Or your failed investment in that tech startup?" A flush crept up his neck. "That's not fair, Mom. You always said you wanted to help." "I did," I acknowledged. "I wanted to help my son. I didn't realize I was funding a lifestyle for people who are ashamed to be photographed with me." Elaine inhaled sharply. "That's not." "It is," I cut her off. "You specifically asked me not to appear in photos with my own son on his birthday because I might damage his professional image." Robert at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Mom, it wasn't personal. It was just business. Family is personal, Robert. Always." A silence fell between us. Around us, tourists took photos of the fountain, children chased pigeons, couples walked hand in hand. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the small family drama unfolding on our bench. "So what now?" Robert finally asked. "You've made your point. Are you going to keep punishing us?" "Punishing you?" I repeated. "Is that what you think this is?" "What else would you call it?" Elaine interjected. "You've put us in an impossible position. Robert's colleagues all know what happened. His boss had to cover the bill, And now you're acting like we've committed some terrible crime by asking for a simple favor at a business function. I studied her face. Beautiful, young, entitled. She genuinely didn't understand. "Let me ask you something," I said quietly. "If your mother had scrimped and saved for decades to give you every advantage, worked extra shifts to pay for your education, supported your every failure, and celebrated your every success, would you ask her to hide because she didn't fit your aesthetic?" Elaine's gaze dropped to her hands. "My mother wouldn't have shown up looking like—" She stopped herself, but not quickly enough. "Looking like what?" I prompted. Robert jumped in. "Mom, Elaine didn't mean anything by it. It's just that your style is a bit dated. We could have helped you shop for something more appropriate if we'd known it mattered so much to you." I almost laughed at the absurdity. They thought this was about clothes. This isn't about my appearance, Robert. This is about respect, basic human dignity. You don't hide family members like they're embarrassing secrets. We weren't hiding you, he protested. Just managing the optics. I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation. The house is yours. Consider it payment for all the years I've supported you. But from now on, my credit cards, my bank accounts, and my resources are mine alone. Panic flashed across Robert's face. Mom, wait. I've raised you, educated you, and set you up in a mortgage-free home. My obligation as a parent is complete. So you're just cutting us off? Robert's voice rose. After one misunderstanding? I shook my head. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a moment of clarity. For both of us. Elaine stood now, too, her cool facade cracking slightly. Isabella, be reasonable. Robert's under consideration for partner. Everything in our life is riding on the next few months. We need— That's exactly it, I interrupted. You see me as something you need, not someone you love. I picked up my purse and turned to leave. Mom, don't walk away, Robert called after me. We still need to talk about this. I looked back at my son, my handsome, accomplished, morally compromised son, and felt a deep sadness that had nothing to do with anger. I'll be going home tomorrow, Robert. You have my number if you want to talk. Really talk, not just negotiate access to my finances. 3 weeks passed with no contact from Robert or Elaine. At first, I checked my phone constantly, expecting another barrage of messages or calls, perhaps even an apology. But there was nothing. The silence spoke volumes. Without financial incentive, I apparently wasn't worth the effort of reconciliation. Back in my modest 2-bedroom home, in Vermont, I settled into my quiet routine. Morning coffee on the porch, volunteer hours at the local library, occasional dinners with the few friends I'd made since moving here after James died. But something had shifted inside me. The confrontation with Robert had torn open a door I'd kept locked for decades, releasing a flood of memories and realizations I could no longer ignore. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I found myself pulling out old photo albums from the storage closet. Dust coated the covers. I hadn't looked at these in years. Opening the first album, I traced my finger over images of a young woman I barely recognized. Me at 25, holding infant Robert, my face glowing with the fierce protective love of a new mother. Page after page documented our life together. Robert's first steps, his first day of kindergarten clutching my hand, James teaching him to ride a bicycle, family camping trips, school plays, all the ordinary moments that built a family. Then came the photos after James died, fewer in number, and with a noticeable absence of joy. 14-year-old Robert, sullen and angry at his father's funeral. My own face, thinner and strained as I struggled to be both mother and father. I paused at a photo of Robert's high school graduation. I remembered that day clearly. I had taken an extra shift at the hospital administration office where I worked to afford the watch I'd given him as a graduation present, the watch he'd sold 6 months later to buy concert tickets. Was I always just a resource to him? I wondered aloud to the empty room. I continued turning pages, noting how the photos changed as Robert grew older. In college, he only called when he needed money. After college, our interactions revolved around his crises, failed relationships, job disappointments, financial emergencies. When had I stopped being his mother and become his safety net? The final album contained photos from Robert's wedding 7 years ago. I had spent $30,000 on that extravagant affair, money James and I had saved for the retirement travels we'd never get to take together. I found a photo of myself standing awkwardly beside Robert and Elaine at the reception. They looked perfect together, like catalog models. I looked out of place in my department store dress, clutching my handbag like a shield. Even then, I had been an afterthought, seated at a distant table with distant relatives no one else wanted to deal with. I closed the album and stared out the window at the rain. For decades, I had poured everything into being a good mother. My time, my energy, my savings, my dreams. I had excused Robert's selfishness, compensated for his failures, enabled his entitlement. I had told myself it was love, but love wasn't supposed to flow only one way. Love wasn't supposed to leave you empty. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. I checked the screen, half expecting Robert's name. Instead, it was Susan, a friend from my book club. "Isabella, I was just thinking about you." Susan's warm voice filled the line. "Would you like to join us for dinner tonight? Nothing fancy, just a few friends getting together at my place." My instinct was to decline. I had laundry to finish, bills to pay, a headache forming behind my eyes. "I'd love to," I heard myself say instead. Susan's surprise was evident in her voice. "Wonderful, 6 o'clock. Just bring yourself." After hanging up, I sat in the silent house, surrounded by memories of a life spent in service to others. Why had I always found it so easy to say no to my own happiness and yes to everyone else's demands? That evening at Susan's, surrounded by women my own age sharing stories and laughter over homemade lasagna, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: belonging. These women didn't care about my dated style or my modest income. They saw me, the real me, not just what I could provide. "Isabella, you mentioned once that you used to work with a camera," Susan said as she served coffee after dinner. "Did you study photography?" I nearly choked on my coffee. "Oh, it was nothing serious. Just a hobby, really." "But you enjoyed it?" pressed Elizabeth, a retired nurse with kind eyes. I nodded, surprised by the lump forming in my throat. "James gave me my first real camera when Robert was born. I took classes at the community college for a while. I even had a small darkroom set up in our basement." "What happened to it?" Susan asked. "Life," I said simply. After James died, there wasn't time or money or... I trailed off, unwilling to admit I had simply stopped believing I deserved to pursue something purely for my own pleasure. "You should start again," Elizabeth said firmly. "My nephew runs a photography studio downtown. They offer classes for all levels. Several of us have taken them." I smiled politely, already forming my excuse. But then I thought of the photo albums at home, of all the years spent putting everyone else first. "Maybe I will," I said. The next morning, I called the number Elizabeth had given me. The photography class cost $450 for 8 weeks. Not an insignificant amount on my fixed income, but manageable. I hesitated only briefly before giving my credit card number. The same credit card that had once paid for Robert's emergencies would now fund something just for me. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with an incoming email from Robert. My heart rate picked up as I opened it. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what happened in New York. I wasn't at my best, and I said things I regret. Elaine and I would like to make it up to you. We're planning a trip to Vermont next weekend to talk in person. On another note, we've been going through some financial readjustments since you cut us off so abruptly. The property taxes on the house are due next month, $12,400, and we're a bit short. Would it be possible for you to help with this last expense? After all, it was your house until recently. Let me know your thoughts. Love, Robert, no apology. No. Acknowledgement of how he had hurt me. Just another request for money, thinly veiled as reconciliation. I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar pull of maternal obligation warring with my newfound sense of self-worth. For a moment, I imagined myself saying yes, transferring the money, welcoming them into my home, cooking their favorite meals, smiling through their thinly veiled condescension. Then I glanced at the confirmation email for my photography class, scheduled to begin next Tuesday evening. Slowly, deliberately, I typed my response. Robert, I'm signed up for a photography class on Tuesday evenings for the next 8 weeks, so I won't be available for a while. As for the property taxes, I'm sure you and Elaine can manage. The house is now your asset and your responsibility. Take care, Mom. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled out my old camera, bag from the back shelf. The leather was cracked, the strap frayed, but the Nikon inside, James's last gift to me before his death, was still solid and real. I held it up to my eye, adjusting the focus, and pointed it toward the window where morning light streamed through the curtains. The familiar click of the shutter felt like the breaking of a long silence. 6 months passed in a blur of discovery. The photography class that had started as a small act of rebellion became the center of my new life. Each Tuesday evening, I joined 11 other students, most decades younger than me, in learning about composition, lighting, and the technical aspects of digital photography. My old Nikon, while cherished, eventually gave way to a new digital camera I purchased with my own carefully saved money. Isabella, these are remarkable, said Mark, our instructor, as he examined my latest assignment, a series of portraits of elderly residents at the local nursing home where I volunteered. You have a gift for capturing emotion. I felt a flush of pleasure at his words. At 64, I had assumed I was beyond the point of developing new talents or receiving genuine praise for my work. The lighting in this one especially, he continued, pointing to a photograph of Edith, a 92-year-old former ballet dancer. I had captured her wrinkled hands positioned as if in mid-performance, the morning light from the window illuminating the graceful arch of her fingers. Thank you, I said simply, accepting his words instead of deflecting them as I once would have. After class, Susan and I walked to our cars together. Our friendship had deepened over the months, evolving from casual acquaintances to genuine confidants. Mark's, right, you know, she said. You have a remarkable eye. Have you thought about showing your work somewhere? I laughed. Who would want to see photographs taken by an amateur grandmother? Susan stopped walking and looked at me seriously. Is that really how you see yourself? Just an amateur grandmother? Her question caught me off guard. What else would I be? An artist, she said firmly. A photographer. A woman with her own vision and voice. I opened my mouth to dismiss her words, then closed it again. For decades, I had defined myself primarily through my relationships to others. James's wife, Robert's mother, the helpful neighbor, the reliable volunteer. When had I last seen myself as a person in my own right? The community center is hosting an exhibition next month, Susan continued. Local artists, all media. You should submit something. I'm not a real artist, I protested. Susan smiled. Neither was I, until I decided I was. That night, I couldn't sleep. Susan's words kept replaying in my mind as I tossed and turned. At 3 a.m, I got up and went to my computer, where I scrolled through the hundreds of photographs I had taken over the past 6 months. There were landscapes, the Vermont, mountains in autumn glory, Mist rising off the lake at dawn. Street scenes from the small downtown area. Children playing in the splash pad. An elderly couple sharing an ice cream cone. A street musician lost in his melody. And my favorite series, the nursing home portraits, each one capturing a life. Well-lived, faces etched with joy and sorrow and everything in between. I selected 10 of my best images and sent them to print at a professional lab Mark had recommended. Then I drafted an email to the community center, inquiring about the exhibition. 2 weeks later, I stood in the community center gallery, watching as a young man carefully hung my photographs on a clean white wall. Each was matted and framed, and expense I had justified as an investment in myself. "These are really powerful," the young man said, as he adjusted a portrait of Mr. Jenkins, a nursing home resident who had fought in World War II. I had captured him staring out a window, his reflection overlaid against the view outside, past and present merging in one image. "Thank you," I said, and this time I didn't qualify or diminish the compliment. The exhibition opening was scheduled for Saturday evening. I had invited Susan and a few other friends from class, but otherwise expected little attention. My work would be displayed alongside that of established local artists, painters, sculptors, and photographers with years of experience. On Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Robert's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the answer button. We hadn't spoken since his email 6 months ago. I had sent him birthday and Christmas cards with brief, pleasant messages, but received no response. Curiosity won out. "Hello? Mom?" His voice sounded different, tighter, less confident. "How are you?" "I'm well, thank you. And you?" "I've been better," he admitted. "Look, I know it's been a while, but I need to talk to you about something important. In person." I closed my eyes, imagining what important meant to Robert. Another financial crisis, no doubt. Another need that only I could fulfill. "I'm rather busy this weekend, Robert. I have an exhibition opening tomorrow night." "Exhibition?" He sounded genuinely confused. "Of what?" "My photography," I said, feeling a small surge of pride. "At the community center." A pause. "I didn't know you were into photography." Of course he didn't. He had never asked. "It's something I've been pursuing for a while now," I said, not mentioning that a while was only 6 months. It felt longer, like I had been working toward this moment my entire life, in some ways. "That's nice," he said, the word sounding forced. "But this is really important, Mom. Elaine and I are going through some changes, and we need to discuss things with you. We can drive up tomorrow. Maybe we could come to your exhibition thing and talk afterward." I considered refusing. Whatever crisis Robert was experiencing, it wasn't my emergency. But curiosity, and yes, a small, persistent maternal instinct, made me agree. "The opening starts at 7. I'll put your names on the guest list." "Great. Thanks, Mom." He hesitated. "And congratulations on your exhibition." After hanging up, I sat quietly, processing my mixed emotions. Part of me was wary of Robert's sudden reappearance in my life. Another part, the part that had carried him inside me, nursed him, taught him to read, still yearned for reconciliation, but this time would be different. This time, I would meet him as Isabella Blackwell, photographer, not just as Robert's mother. The next evening, I dressed with particular care. A simple black dress I had purchased specifically for the occasion, comfortable but stylish flats, silver earrings James had given me on our 20th anniversary. I arrived at the gallery early to check my display one last time. "Nervous?" Susan asked, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of wine. "A little," I admitted, accepting one of the glasses. "And not just about the exhibition. My son is coming tonight." Susan's eyebrows rose. The son who asked you not to be in his photos. Who wanted you to pay his property taxes? I nodded. He called yesterday. Says he needs to discuss something important. Susan's expression hardened slightly. Just remember, Isabella, you don't owe him anything. I squeezed her hand gratefully. I know. This is my night, not his. As guests began to arrive, I positioned myself near my photographs, ready to discuss my work. To my surprise, several people stopped to examine my images, asking thoughtful questions about my technique and inspiration. You've captured so much dignity in these faces, one woman commented, studying my nursing home portraits. They're not just old people. They're individuals with rich inner lives. That's exactly what I wanted to convey, I said, feeling a warm glow of satisfaction. At 7:30, I spotted Robert and Elaine entering the gallery. They looked out of place in their expensive city clothes. Robert in a tailored suit, Elaine in a designer dress that cost more than my entire exhibition budget. I watched them scan the room, finally spotting me near my photographs. As they approached, I noticed something different about them. Robert seemed thinner, his face drawn. Elaine's perfect appearance showed small cracks. Her hair less immaculate than usual, dark circles partially concealed beneath her eyes. "Mom," Robert said, leaning in to kiss my cheek stiffly. "Congratulations on your exhibit." "Thank you for coming," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Let me show you my work." Robert and Elaine followed me around the exhibition space, maintaining the polite expressions of people viewing art they didn't understand or particularly appreciate. Elaine occasionally murmured interesting or how unique in that tone reserved for things one finds slightly distasteful. Robert remained mostly silent, checking his watch when he thought I wasn't looking. "These are quite compelling," said a man's voice behind us. We turned to find Mark, my photography instructor, smiling warmly. "Isabella has a remarkable talent for capturing the essence of her subjects." Robert's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're Isabella's instructor," Mark supplied, extending his hand. "Though at this point, I think of myself more as a colleague. Your mother has developed her own distinctive style." "I didn't realize Mom was taking this so seriously," Robert said, glancing at me with something like confusion. "Oh, she's very serious," Mark replied. "In fact, the Western Vermont Arts Council has expressed interest in featuring her nursing home series in their upcoming exhibition on aging in America." This was news to me. I looked at Mark in surprise, but he just winked. "The Arts Council?" I repeated. "I was going to tell you later," Mark said. "They contacted me after seeing your work online. I hope you don't mind that I shared your portfolio." "Of course not," I said, feeling slightly dazed. "That's wonderful." I glanced at Robert and Elaine, whose expressions had shifted from polite boredom to something closer to reassessment. It shouldn't have mattered what they thought. It shouldn't have affected the warm glow of pride I felt at Mark's words. But some small, lingering part of me, the part that had spent decades seeking Robert's approval, felt a surge of satisfaction at their surprise. "Well, I'll leave you to catch up with your family," Mark said, squeezing my arm gently before moving on to chat with other guests. An awkward silence fell. Finally, Robert cleared his throat. "Mom, could we talk somewhere private?" I nodded, leading them to a quiet corner of the gallery where several chairs had been arranged near a refreshment table. As we sat down, I noticed Elaine's hands trembling slightly as she placed her purse on her lap. "What's going on, Robert?" I asked directly. He exchanged a glance with Elaine before speaking. "We've had to sell the house." I blinked, taking a moment to process his words. "The house in Westchester. Why?" Robert's jaw tightened. "A lot has changed since we last spoke. My firm downsized, and I was one of the partners let go." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I never wanted my son to suffer. "The severance package wasn't what I expected," he continued. And the job market for senior investment bankers isn't great right now. We tried to hold on to the house, but with the property taxes and maintenance costs. He trailed off. When did this happen? I asked. 4 months ago, Elaine said, speaking for the first time. Her usual polished confidence was noticeably absent. We've been living on savings, but those are running out. I see, I said quietly. 4 months, and they hadn't contacted me until now. Not for emotional support, not for advice, only when they needed financial help. We've found a smaller place, Robert continued, a condo in New Jersey. But we need help with the down payment. There it was. The real reason for their sudden appearance in my life. How much? I asked. 60,000, Robert said, watching my face carefully. We'd pay you back, of course. I took a slow breath, feeling strangely calm. 6 months ago, this request would have sent me scrambling to liquidate investments, rearrange my budget, do whatever was necessary to rescue my son. Now, I felt only a quiet clarity. I don't have that kind of money available, Robert. His face fell. But your retirement accounts are for my retirement, I finished firmly. I'm 64 years old. I may live another 20 or 30 years. I need to be financially secure. But we're talking about our home, Elaine interjected, her voice rising slightly. We have nowhere else to go. What happened to the money from selling the house? I asked. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Most of it went to paying off debts, and the housing market took a downturn, so we didn't get what we expected. I nodded slowly, understanding the full picture. They had lived beyond their means for years, accumulating debt, counting on Robert's career trajectory to keep pace with their lifestyle. When that failed, they turned to the one person who had always bailed them out. I'm truly sorry about your situation, I said gently. But I can't give you $60,000. Robert's expression hardened. Can't or won't? Both, I replied. Honestly, I don't have that kind of liquid cash, and even if I did, I wouldn't deplete my security to provide you with a down payment. Unbelievable, Elaine muttered. After everything we've done for you. I looked at her in genuine confusion. What exactly have you done for me, Elaine? She faltered, clearly unprepared for the question. We've included you in family events. We invited you to Robert's birthday, where you asked me not to appear in photographs, I reminded her quietly. That again? Robert groaned. Are you still holding a grudge over one small request? It wasn't small to me, I said, and it wasn't just that incident. It was years of being treated like an ATM rather than a mother. Years of supporting you financially while being kept at arm's length emotionally. That's not fair, Robert protested. We've been busy building our lives. Yes, with my money, I pointed out. Money I earned working 60-hour weeks after your father died. Money I saved instead of traveling or pursuing my own interests. So that's it? Robert demanded. One. Mistake, and you abandon us when we need you most? I looked at my son. My handsome, entitled son who still, after everything, couldn't see beyond his own needs. I haven't abandoned you, Robert. I'm right here. If you need emotional support, advice, or even a place to stay temporarily while you get back on your feet, I'm here for you. But I'm no longer financing your lifestyle. A place to stay? Elaine repeated, looking horrified. In Vermont? My home has a guest room, I said. It's small but comfortable. We can't live in Vermont, Robert sputtered. My career is in New York. Our friends, our whole life is there. Then you'll need to find a solution that works for your budget, I said reasonably. Many people live in New York without needing $60,000 down payments from their mothers. Robert stood abruptly. This is a waste of time. Let's go, Elaine. Elaine rose as well, shooting me a cold glance. Congratulations on your little hobby, Isabella. I hope it keeps you warm at night knowing you've turned your back on family. I remained seated, looking up at them calmly. I haven't turned my back on family, Elaine. I've simply recognized that family is about more than financial transactions. It's about mutual respect and genuine care. Save the lecture? Robert snapped. We needed you, and you failed us. Remember that the next time you're alone on Christmas or sick with no one to help you. His words were meant to wound, to trigger my deepest fears of abandonment and isolation in old age. 6 months ago, they might have succeeded. But now, looking around at the gallery filled with my work, at Susan and my other friends chatting, nearby, at Mark who believed in my talent, I realized those fears no longer controlled me. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said sincerely. My door is always open to you, Robert. Not my bank account, but my heart and my home. When you're ready to have a real relationship, one that isn't based on what I can give you financially, I'll be here. After they left, I sat alone for a few minutes, feeling strangely peaceful. There was sadness, yes. Perhaps there always would be when it came to Robert. But the crushing guilt, the desperate need to earn his love through sacrifice, was gone. Are you okay? Susan asked, appearing beside me with a fresh glass of wine. Yes, I said, realizing with some surprise that it was true. I really am. The rest of the evening passed in a pleasant blur. Several people expressed interest in purchasing my photographs. The gallery owner asked if I would consider teaching a workshop on portrait photography. By the time I drove home, my car was filled with flowers from well-wishers, and my heart was full of a new kind of confidence. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone pinged with a text from Robert. I'm sorry about tonight. We're just desperate. Please reconsider. I typed back. I meant what I said. I can't help financially, but I'm here for you in every other way. His response came quickly. That's not enough. I set the phone down, feeling a twinge of sorrow, but no regret. For the first time in my life, I had set a boundary and held it, even in the face of emotional manipulation. On my nightstand sat a framed photograph, one I had taken years ago of Robert as a child, laughing as he ran through a sprinkler. In our backyard, I touched it gently, remembering the simple joy of that day, the uncomplicated love between a mother and her child. I hope you find your way back, I whispered to the image of my smiling boy. Not to my wallet, but to me. Then I turned out the light and slept more peacefully than I had in years, surrounded by the quiet satisfaction of a life finally being lived on my own terms.